entered the exclusion zone. Attention, Commander. This is a no-fire zone. Aggressors will be penalized.
Cannot comply. Cannot comply. Cannot comply. Cannot comply.
You are clear of the port. FFC out.
Cannot comply. Cannot comply.
Foxtrot Alpha Romeo, comms link online. Regulate your approach speed and submit to security scans if you are required to do so.
Ready to engage. 4, 3, 2, 1. Engage. Frameshift drive charging. Frameshift drive charging. Frameshift drive charging. Mission objective detected.
The Alliance. Introduction. Rise, like lions after slumber,
Cargo scoop deployed.
in unvanquishable number. Shake your chains to earth, like dew which in sleep had fallen on you. Ye are many, they are few. Percy Bysshe Shelley, The Mask of Anarchy, 1819.
I've read your speech a dozen times, Mick. We can't use it. Sure, we could sound off about self-rule and freedom from tyranny and the dignity of the working man/woman, and the young hotheads would lap it up like they always do. I'm not saying we don't need that stuff, but we mustn't forget it's just marketing. A shiny wrapper. It's not enough. If we're going to make the Alliance of Independent Systems happen, we need more than tub-thumping speeches from a war hero. We need to show our people that the damn thing can work. I want spending plans, dividend forecasts, surveyors' reports. I want data so dry you don't need to believe in it. The people are tired and heartsick. They've been sold dreams too many times by both sides, so let's not try to sell them anymore. It's time to wake up.
Private communique from Meredith Argent to Mick Turner, founders of the Alliance. The Alliance is the youngest of the galaxy's
Mission objective complete. Incoming mission critical message.
and is perhaps best understood in terms of what it chooses not to be. It rejects both the extreme capitalism of the Federation and the rigid hierarchy of the Empire, choosing instead a third way of voluntary association for mutual benefit. The desire for freedom from interference, both from external threats and internal bureaucracy, was the key motivation behind the Alliance's founding and is enshrined in its Articles of Association. The governments of the member systems are given as much autonomy to create their own laws and administer their own affairs as possible. The right to political self-determination and cultural self-expression are essential to the Alliance, but it remains to be seen whether the ultimate result will be stable harmony or a cacophony of dissenting voices. Every Alliance member knows that alliances have been made
Cargo scoop retracted.
before, many times over, only to collapse. The Alliance. History. Alioth was colonized. The crucible in which the Alliance was forged was Alioth, a system so rich in gas and mineral resources that early surveyors considered it a stellar El Dorado. When the
Frameshift drive charging.
Federation established its
Frameshift drive charging.
first colony on Alioth 5b in 2452, they gave the planet the less grandiose name of Fruitcake, as mineral deposits lay in the loamy soils as abundantly as raisins in
4, 3, 2, 1.
Later, commentators would reflect, bitterly, that the world was well named because everyone wanted a peace. A conflict over mining rights drew in the superpowers. Alioth's prosperity soon attracted corporations eager to support the developing system in exchange for a share of the profits. A dispute over rights quickly escalated into an armed conflict, prompting the Empire to dispatch a military force, ostensibly for the colonists' protection. The Federation also sent ships, but theirs were a response to the corporation's plea for aid. Unable to directly engage the Federal ships without sparking a war, the Empire covertly encouraged the Alioth colonists to renounce the Federation and accept Imperial protection. thus freeing the Empire to engage with the occupying federal forces in sympathy with the will of the people. This marked the first of many incidents in which the people of Alioth were used to advance the agenda of another power. Federation-sponsored insurrection. In 2530, the Federation set out to undermine Imperial control of Alioth by exploiting local resentment of the governor. They covertly supported acts of protest and petty vandalism. Then, when the inevitable Imperial crackdown followed, stoked the fires of social unrest. A terrorist movement called the Quakers emerged, and the atrocities escalated. The years that followed saw a protracted and degrading series of proxy wars and cynical propaganda campaigns as the federal, imperial, and corporate powers all contended for Alioth. The system made an abortive attempt to establish its independence in 2617, resulting in a short-lived cooperation between the Empire and the Federation, neither of which were willing to allow this. The Revolution. In the early 4th millennium, both the Federation and the Empire had a presence in the Alioth system. Fruitcake, now known as Gordonworld, was a federal protectorate, while the Empire had earlier conducted terraforming experiments on the world of New California and also held gas mining platforms in the system. The federal corporations supplying New California had raised the prices of their goods several times in the previous years, and when they imposed yet another price hike, the planet's inhabitants revolted. In the insurrection that followed, rebels commandeered any available ships and headed out to the gas mining platforms, where they attacked the outpost's corporate employees. Alarmed, the Empire and the Federation dispatched ships to put down the rebellion, but were beaten back by a hastily assembled force made up of fighters from Alioth and, crucially, volunteers from nearby independent systems. Neither the Empire nor the Federation were able to gain a foothold, and eventually both forces had to withdraw. The Empire faced too many logistical problems fighting so far from home, while the Federation's efforts were undermined by public sympathy for the rebels. An alliance was brokered. The victory in Alioth had proven that independent systems working together could hold their own against the superpowers. It fell to pilot Mick Turner and scientist Meredith Argent to ride the wave of public spirit and propose a permanent alliance, under whose aegis independent systems could enjoy freedom from imperial and federal interference. The alliance was founded in 3230.
Docking request granted.
And in the next 2 decades, it expanded its membership to more than 20 systems, some defecting from the Federation and the Empire, others pledging as independents. The Alliance. Society. Many worlds, few rules, no overlords. The Alliance's Articles of Membership are designed to unite the member systems with strong, straightforward bonds that allow as much self-determination as possible. Membership guarantees mutual prosperity through guaranteed free trade and security
Landing gear deployed.
Through the Alliance Defense Force, while leaving much of the business of government to the individual members. The Alliance Assembly acts as a central arbitration committee, helping to settle disputes between member systems. It also oversees formal arrangements between members, such as treaties, research goals, and mutually agreed policies. As no one system can be allowed to carry more weight than another, the Assembly frequently finds itself bogged down in endless back-and-forth negotiations. Getting them to agree on anything is a task often compared to herding linglangs, notoriously ill-tempered carnivores from the Achenar system. A body of civil servants who remain uninvolved in politics handle most of the day-to-day administrative work that enables the Alliance to function. Conditional autonomy for member systems. Alliance members are required to subscribe to and uphold
Docking successful. Engines disengaged.
the Code of Human Rights, and to have a democratically elected government. Citizens of any member state have a right of freedom of movement and residence within any other member state. Furthermore, all member systems are obliged to give immediate military assistance to any fellow member when necessary. The Alliance. Military. The Alliance Defense Force. While each Alliance member system maintains its own navy, all members are required to commit ships and crew to the Alliance Defense Force. This rapid response group usually remains within Alliance space.
Incoming message.
And its tasks vary from providing a beleaguered system with military assistance to evacuating settlements hit by natural disaster. A 6-member Council of Admirals oversees the Alliance Defense Force. It is accountable to the Assembly, but does not require its approval before taking action. This freedom of decision-making prevents urgent military action being delayed by tedious debate. The Alliance. Culture and values. Cooperation, mutual aid, tolerance, and respect. The values that bind the Alliance systems also hold true on an interpersonal level. Just as the different worlds of the Alliance formally recognize one another's legitimacy and value, individuals are generally reluctant to show prejudice against others and will band together to help those in genuine need. Diversity is strength. Members of the Alliance are not obliged to conform to what they consider the corporate saturation of federal culture or the status-obsessed posturing of the Imperials. Individual systems are encouraged to preserve and celebrate their own cultural identities. This approach results in a rich variety of artistic, literary, and dramatic output. Free to speak, free to protest. One curious cultural constant across the Alliance members' systems is the way the citizens indulge their freedom to complain. They can criticize their governments without fear of repression, and they frequently do so. Previous experience of exploitation has left many citizens cynical, but possessed of a certain mordant humor and a willingness to take life as it comes. The Alliance. Diplomacy.
Released. Engines engaged. Landing gear
Relations.
retracted.
The Federation. Alliance attitudes to the Federation vary sharply, depending on whether one is asking about the Federation's government or its citizenry. The government is seen as a hidebound relic, unable to arrest its slow decline into decadence. But the general populace are much more
Frameshift drive charging.
passionately viewed. An Alliance citizen, proud of his or her own emancipation, is likely to have a rather condescending view of a federal citizen. They are characterized as ignorant Jew.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Kept satiated by mass-market entertainment and branded consumer goods. This is not seen as their fault, however. On the contrary, it is widely held that the Federation and the corporate barons
Mission objective detected.
deliberately keep the people in this servile state. The Alliance is more interested in enticing federal systems to join its union, thereby winning the moral war, than in exacting vengeance for the wrongs of the past. There has been too much violence already. The Empire. To the Alliance, the Empire is anathema. With its monolithic culture, veneration of opulence, disdain for human rights, and tolerance of slavery, it could not be further from the Alliance's values of mutual respect and freedom from exploitation. Yet, for all this, many Alliance members would rather deal with the Empire than the Federation. The common belief is that the Federation will always pretend to be something it is not. At least with the Empire, you know what you're dealing with. Most Alliance citizens view the emergence of a progressive movement within the Empire with cynicism. Everyone knows that the Empire is incapable of changing its ways. The whole imperial social model is an imitation of the past. But some in the Alliance nevertheless welcome the ascension of the first female emperor. The edifice may not be about to crumble, but such a profound change cannot be ignored. The Alliance. Introduction. Rise, like lions after slumber, in unvanquishable number. Shake your chains to earth, like dew which in sleep had fallen on you. Ye are many, they are few. Percy Bysshe Shelley, The Mask of Anarchy, 1819.
I've read your speech a dozen times, Mick. We can't use it. Sure, we could sound off about self-rule and freedom from tyranny and the dignity of the working man slash woman, and the young...
Mission objective detected. Cargo scoop deployed.
disengaged. Exit is clear.
The Guardians. Introduction. The Guardians were a non-human race that occupied a large area of space several million years ago. At its height, the Guardian civilization was technologically superior to human civilization of the 33rd century, and occupied an area of roughly equivalent size. The Guardians endured as a spacefaring civilization for at least 8,000 years before being destabilized by a lengthy civil war. The surviving Guardians were then destroyed by artificially intelligent machines of their own creation. The galaxy contains the ruins of dozens of Guardian settlements, and data logs recovered from these sites have allowed humanity to compile a remarkably detailed picture of Guardian society. The Guardians. Early history. The Guardian society originally consisted of groups of pack hunters who banded together for mutual protection before organizing themselves into clans. Even at this stage, the Guardians were highly intelligent, and they developed sophisticated hunting strategies that quickly saw them become their planet's apex predator. The Guardians' nascent civilization consisted of two discrete ethnic groups, one based primarily in the south of the planet and one in the north. As these groups expanded, they began to encroach on each other's territory, leading to a conflict that quickly blossomed into civil war. The Northern Clan, despite being the smaller of the two groups, overcame their enemy swiftly and with minimal bloodshed, bringing the entirety of the Guardian civilization under their leadership. In the centuries that followed, the Guardian society developed rapidly.
Request approved. Head directly to Docking Bay 1-4.
Despite their warlike instincts, the Guardians possessed a remarkable capacity for collaboration and compromise. Their willingness to defer immediate gains in favor of lasting societal benefits allowed them to establish a stable, mutually cooperative society that was to remain peaceful and prosperous for thousands of years.
Continue on this vector. Approach is good.
The Guardians. Technological era. Although the Guardian society was in many ways a model of social equilibrium, the Guardians were nevertheless at the mercy of an insidious issue: overpopulation. As their civilization grew and the amount of available land and resources dwindled, the Guardians set their sights on interplanetary colonization. By this time, the Guardians had developed a rudimentary form of space travel, but as the pressures of overpopulation became...
Landing gear retracted. Landing gear deployed.
The rate of technological progress accelerated, and the Guardians' imperfect starships were soon supplanted by fast, powerful spacefaring vessels. In the centuries that followed, the Guardian civilization expanded rapidly, eventually coming to occupy a region equal to that inhabited by present-day humanity. The Guardians' next major development was the
Contact confirmation. Clear for system shutdown.
creation of an interstellar communications system known as the Monolith Network. In addition to functioning as a comprehensive cultural archive, the network allowed those connected to it to freely and instantaneously share knowledge and ideas. The connection to the network was dependent on the use of neural implants, and some of the Guardians were uneasy about this fusion of biological and non-biological. The Guardians. War with the Thargoids. Tens of thousands of years earlier, when the Guardians were still a non-spacefaring race, a group of Thargoids entered what would later become Guardian space, looking for new systems to colonize. In addition to earmarking several systems containing ammonia worlds, they prepared a number of planets for occupation by seeding them with barnacles. These genetically modified constructs were designed to extract resources from a planet and transform them into resources more useful to the Thargoids. For the Thargoids, seeding a planet with barnacles
Cargo hold at maximum capacity.
was an important step in preparing an area for occupation. The Thargoids did not return to these systems for thousands of years, and when they did, they discovered that a new race had occupied them, the Guardians. The Thargoids promptly attacked, due to their innate territorialism. The Guardians responded with a partial retreat, but they also started trying to find ways to communicate with the Thargoids, hoping to determine the cause of their aggression, and perhaps negotiate a truce. After considerable effort, they succeeded in acquiring sufficient understanding of the Thargoids' language to determine the invaders' agenda, but they were unable to convince the Thargoids they bore them no ill will. And the Thargoids were unshakable in their belief that they must repel any race that posed a potential threat. The Guardians were left with no choice but to defend themselves militarily. At first, they deployed soldiers, but they quickly realized that drones and other mechanized defenses would be more effective against such a physically formidable enemy. Within a relatively short period of time, the Guardians' war machines became highly sophisticated, able to recognize Thargoid engineering and to operate entirely independently. Similarly, the Thargoids' biomechanical technology was engineered to identify anything of Guardian origin. To this day, many millions of years after the Guardians disappeared, Guardian artifacts are still able to recognize Thargoid technology. And Thargoid technology still reacts negatively to the presence of Guardian artifacts. The Guardians' war machines felt no fear, fatigue, or uncertainty. The Thargoids, meanwhile, had entered Guardian space unprepared for a protracted military campaign, and ultimately they were forced to retreat. For the Guardians, this was cause for celebration, but many still harbored doubts about the rapid rate of technological progress. Doubt
Ship is released. You may leave when ready.
that the development of sophisticated military hardware had done nothing to alleviate. The Guardians. Final era. For decades, the Guardians have been experimenting with artificial intelligence, but the creation of the Monolith Network and the knowledge sharing it facilitated dramatically accelerated the rate of progress. Soon, the Guardians' experiments bore fruit, resulting in the first fully sentient machines. These constructs were seen as a means to further enhance the Guardians' technological mastery and were integrated into various aspects of their society. New neural implants were developed that connected the Guardians with both the construct
Landing gear retracted.
and the Monolith Network in a symbiotic circle. But not everyone was happy with this development. The Guardians had always venerated nature, and many saw this new paradigm as a perversion of the natural order. A schism emerged between the nature-worshipping
Frameshift drive charging.
traditionalists and the technologically minded
Frameshift drive charging.
progressives. A schism that widened with alarming speed. Efforts were made to diffuse the rising tension, but the traditionalists felt irrevocably alienated by the rapid rate of change. The construct
4, 3, 2, 1.
and the Monolith Network became scapegoats for all manner of social ills, and the traditionalists began to clamor for a return to simpler times. Ultimately, the ideological divergence became insurmountable, and a second civil war erupted, quickly engulfing most of the Guardian star systems. In its early stages, the war was fought primarily by soldiers, but within a decade, and after significant loss of life, most of the fighting was conducted remotely. The progressives
Frameshift drive charging.
fought their enemies with automated war machines, while the traditionalists relied mostly on biological weapons. The internecine conflict raged for over 100 years, bringing the Guardian civilization
4, 3, 2, 1.
to its knees and retarding further social development. The increasingly zealous traditionalists devoted most of their resources to honoring the dead, exacerbating the problem. As the Guardian society declined, most withdrew into fortified settlements. Meanwhile, the artificially intelligent constructs were horrified by the destruction unfolding around them. Extrapolating from the current situation, they determined that even if peace was restored, the Guardians would never be able to transcend their violent natures. They decided that the only way to preclude further violence,
Frameshift drive charging.
while giving the construct's burgeoning society the best possible chance of survival, was to destroy what remained of the Guardian civilization. By this time, the constructs had been given complete control.
4, 3, 2, 1.
The Guardians' munitions and automated war machines. Their attack, when it came, was swift and merciless. The strikes were executed with a precision that only a machine race could accomplish. The Guardians were utterly destroyed. The Guardians. Physiology. The Guardians were a bipedal race.
Frameshift drive charging.
The typical Guardian was taller and more slender than the average human. They had small round eyes, a vestigial nose, and 4 digits on each hand. Their vision was superior to that of
4, 3, 2,
humans, while their sense of smell was poorer. Their senses of hearing and touch were roughly equivalent to our own. The Guardians had pinkish red skin, but there was some variation among ethnic groups, with tones ranging from pale pink to deep crimson. They also had serrated bony ridges on the outside of their forearms, which were used as weapons during their early history, when they were still semi-primitive pack hunters. The Guardians' environmental needs were broadly similar to those of humans. Their homeworld was warmer and had lower gravity than most Earth-like worlds. And when they began to colonize other planets, they typically favored ones that shared these qualities. The Guardians had 2 genders and reproduced sexually. Procreation was a matter of personal choice, but each individual was obligated to be a parent at least once in their life to ensure the continuation of their genetic line. The average gestation period was around 300 days, and infants were effectively helpless for a period after birth. Much like human young, infants were raised in communal creches rather than by their parents, in keeping with the collaborative philosophies that underpinned Guardian society. The Guardians. Society. The Guardians' social constructs were the key not only to their rapid development, but also to the stability that defined the halcyon days of their civilization. Although the Guardians had a natural tendency towards collaboration, it was not until the end of the First Civil War that this tendency had a measurable impact on their society. The social reorganization that followed the war included the creation of statutes that defined not only individuals' rights, but also their responsibilities to each other. As the Guardian society developed, further laws were passed that required individuals to participate in socially progressive activities, from caring for the young to conducting scientific research. These responsibilities were supported by the state, which made education and information freely available to all. For most of their history, the Guardians had no formal faith, but the creation of the Monolith Network precipitated the emergence of a nature religion that decried the veneration of technology. Although this religion had its roots in the Guardians' long-standing reverence for the natural world, it quickly became a radical movement, violently opposed to the use of neural implants and other advanced technologies. Ultimately, this new religion was to endure for only a short period, its existence cut short by the destruction of the Guardians.
Logan Peterson, Foxtrot Alpha Romeo. Comms link established. Please approach the station at a safe speed and give way to larger vessels, Commander.
Society. The Guardians. Technology.
Permission authorized. Prep for arrival on landing pad 16.
The Guardians' pre-industrial history was in many ways similar to that of the human race, with the development of tools and agriculture proving central to their development. But one respect in which they differed was in their understanding of biological engineering, the practice of selective breeding in order to eliminate.
You're on course, Commander. Ground crew are on standby.
emulate or promote certain genetic traits began before the First Civil War. And as the Guardian Society progressed, their skill as genetic engineers developed in step. After the war, the Guardians developed the ability to enhance their immune systems to guard against infection, and engineered specific microorganisms to
Restrict speed to 100 meters per second.
eliminate biological threats. Genetic manipulation also played a part in prenatal care, which involved the removal of hereditary diseases and other undesirable conditions prior to birth. The Guardians were an ecologically conscientious people who assiduously avoided the use of rockets and fossil fuels. Their first spacecraft lacked any form of internal propulsion and were fired into space with electromagnetic launchers. Pilots and passengers were cocooned inside bubbles of breathable gel, which protected them from G-forces of launch and doubled as hibernation pods during long journeys. When it came to warfare, the Guardians relied initially on the blade-like protrusions on their forearms, and later on simple weapons like spears and bows. As they entered the technological era, they developed electromagnetic projectile weapons, utilizing the same technology they used to launch their first spacecraft. They also developed extremely effective shields, capable of protecting cities.
Attention, do not obstruct landing pads, Commander.
Even of withstanding orbital bombardment. At that time, however, large-scale conflict was virtually unheard of, and it was not until the conflict with the Thargoids that further military innovations were made. The Guardian's Second Civil War was fought principally with bespoke biological weapons employed by the traditionalists and automated war machines used by the progressives. The shields that protected the Guardian cities were unable to resist these new weapons, forcing many of the Guardians to withdraw into heavily fortified settlements. But the Guardians' most significant technological achievements were unarguably the creation of the Monolith Network and the development of artificial intelligence. The use of neural implants to connect the Guardians with their creations could have ushered in a whole new era of scientific and technological discovery, but unfortunately, these innovations were to lead only to the Guardians' destruction. The Guardians. Language. The Guardians shared a single language, with only minor
Contact. Docking restraints engaged.
variations. And for the weapon, even after they colonized other planets, they continued to share a common tongue. The Guardians had three primary forms of communication: a spoken language, a gestural language, and a written language. Their spoken language emerged first, followed by a gestural language that allowed them to communicate silently while hunting. This sign language formed the basis of their written language. Consequently, while their written and gestural languages correlated closely, their spoken language was largely distinct. The Guardian's spoken language was used principally to communicate emotional concepts and played a central role in social bonding, while their written language was used mainly to communicate formal and practical ideas. Significantly, their written language was logographic, meaning the words and phrases were represented by single characters. The Guardians. Human Guardian Contact. In 3301, the federal presidential vessel, Starship One, suffered catastrophic drive failure during a tour of frontier systems, resulting in the ship's destruction. Jasmina Halsey, at that time the federal president, was left drifting in an escape pod, unconscious. During this period of stasis, Halsey believed she was visited by transdimensional beings of extraordinary intelligence and compassion. Later, when she was rescued and revived, she was left with the conviction that this experience had been real and not merely a hallucination. Halsey proceeded to experience visions of mysterious alien worlds and cities, dense metropolises full of activity and life. She shared these visions with the rest of humanity, prompting explorers to set off in search of these undiscovered planets. This led to the discovery of the first Guardian ruins in the Sinuev XRH D11102 system. The fact that these sites were devoid of life led to speculation that Halsey had seen the Guardian worlds not as they are, but as they had been. In the months that followed, several further sites were found. The engineer Ramtar started researching the Guardians and eventually succeeded in developing a decryption algorithm that could decode Guardian data, leading to a much deeper understanding of their lost civilization. Since then, other engineers have leveraged Ramtar's discoveries to develop Guardian human technology. The Guardians. Introduction. The Guardians were a non-human race that occupied a large area of space several million years ago. At its height, the Guardian civilization was technologically superior to human civilization of the 33rd century and occupied an area of roughly equivalent size. The Guardians endured as a spacefaring civilization for at least 8,000 years before being destabilized by a lengthy civil war. The surviving Guardians were then destroyed by artificially intelligent machines of their own creation. The galaxy contains the ruins of dozens of Guardian settlements, and data logs recovered from these sites have allowed humanity to compile a remarkably detailed picture of Guardian society. The Guardians. Early history. The Guardian society originally consisted of groups of pack hunters who banded together for mutual protection before organizing themselves into clans. Even at this stage, the Guardians were highly intelligent, and they developed sophisticated hunting strategies that quickly saw them become their planet's apex predator. The Guardians' nascent civilization consisted of two discrete ethnic groups, one based primarily in the south of the planet and one in the north. As these groups expanded, they began to encroach on each other's territory, leading to a conflict that quickly blossomed into civil war. The Northern Clan, despite being the smaller of the two groups, overcame their enemy swiftly and with minimal bloodshed, bringing the entirety of the Guardian civilization under their leadership. In the centuries that followed, the Guardian society developed rapidly. Despite their warlike instincts, the Guardians possessed a remarkable capacity for collaboration and compromise. Their willingness to defer immediate gains in favor of lasting societal benefits allowed them to establish a stable, mutually cooperative society that was to remain peaceful and prosperous for thousands of years. The Guardians. Technological era. Although the Guardian society was in many ways a model of social equilibrium, the Guardians were nevertheless at the mercy of an insidious issue: overpopulation. As their civilization grew and the amount of available land and resources dwindled, the Guardians set their sights on interplanetary colonization. By this time, the Guardians had developed a rudimentary form of space travel, but as the pressures of overpopulation became more acute, the rate of technological progress accelerated, and the Guardians' imperfect starships were soon supplanted by fast, powerful spacefaring vessels. In the centuries that followed, the Guardian civilization expanded rapidly, eventually coming to occupy a region equal to that inhabited by present-day humanity. The Guardians' next major development was the creation of an interstellar communications system known as the Monolith Network. In addition to functioning as a comprehensive cultural archive, the network allowed those connected to it to freely and instantaneously share knowledge and ideas. But connection to the network was dependent on the use of neural implants, and some of the Guardians were uneasy about this fusion of biological and non-biological. The Guardians. War with the Thargoids. Tens of thousands of years earlier, when the Guardians were still a non-spacefaring race, a group of Thargoids entered what would later become Guardian space, looking for new systems to colonize. In addition to earmarking several systems containing ammonia worlds, they prepared a number of planets for occupation by seeding them with barnacles. These genetically modified constructs were designed to extract resources from a planet and transform them into resources more useful to the Thargoids. For the Thargoids, seeding a planet with barnacles was an important step in preparing an area for occupation. The Thargoids did not return to these systems for thousands of years, and when they did, they discovered that a new race had occupied them: the Guardians. The Thargoids promptly attacked, due to their innate territorialism. The Guardians responded with a partial retreat, But they also started trying to find ways to communicate with the Thargoids, hoping to determine the cause of their aggression, and perhaps negotiate a truce. After considerable effort, they succeeded in acquiring sufficient understanding of the Thargoids' language to determine the invaders' agenda. But they were unable to convince the Thargoids they bore them no ill will, and the Thargoids were unshakable in their belief that they must repel any race that posed a potential threat. The Guardians were left with no choice but to defend themselves militarily. At first, they deployed soldiers, but they quickly realized that drones and other mechanized defenses would be more effective against such a physically formidable enemy. Within a relatively short period of time, the Guardians' war machines became highly sophisticated, able to recognize Thargoid engineering and to operate entirely independently. Similarly, the Thargoids' biomechanical technology was engineered to identify anything of Guardian origin. To this day, many millions of years after the Guardians disappeared, Guardian artifacts are still able to recognize Thargoid technology, and Thargoid technology still reacts negatively to the presence of Guardian artifacts. The Guardians' war machines felt no fear, fatigue, or uncertainty. The Thargoids, meanwhile, had entered Guardian space unprepared for a protracted military campaign, and ultimately they were forced to retreat.
Landing competence engaged. Departure authorized.
The Guardians, this was cause for celebration, but many still harbored doubts about the rapid rate of technological progress, doubts that the development of sophisticated military hardware had done nothing to alleviate. The Guardians. Final era. For decades, the Guardians have been experimenting with artificial intelligence, but the creation of the Monolith Network and the knowledge sharing it facilitated dramatically accelerated the rate of progress. Soon, the Guardians' experiments bore fruit, resulting in the first fully sentient machines. These constructs were seen as a means to further enhance the Guardians' technological mastery and were integrated into various aspects of their society. New neural implants were developed that connected the Guardians with both the constructs and the Monolith Network in a symbiotic circle. But not everyone was happy with this development. The Guardians had always venerated nature, and many saw this new paradigm as a perversion of the natural order. A schism emerged between the nature-worshipping traditionalists and the technologically minded progressives, a schism that widened with alarming speed. Efforts were made to diffuse the rising tension, but the traditionalists felt irrevocably alienated by the rapid rate of change.
Frameshift drive charging.
The constructs and the Monolith Network became scapegoats for all manner of social ills, and the traditionalists began to clamor for a return to simpler times. Ultimately, the ideological
4, 3, 2, 1.
divergence proved insurmountable, and a second civil war erupted, quickly engulfing most of the Guardian star systems. In its early stages, the war was fought primarily by soldiers. Within a decade, and after a significant loss of life, most of the fighting was conducted remotely. The progressives fought their enemies with automated war machines, while the traditionalists relied mostly on biological weapons.
Frameshift drive charging.
The internecine conflict raged for over 100 years, bringing the Guardian civilization to its knees and retarding further social development. The increasingly zealous
4, 3, 2, 1.
traditionalists devoted most of their resources to honoring the dead, exacerbating the problem. As the Guardian society declined, most withdrew into fortified settlements. Meanwhile, the artificially intelligent constructs were horrified by the destruction unfolding around them. Extrapolating from the current situation, they determined that even if peace was restored, the Guardians would never be able to transcend their violent natures. They decided that the only way to preclude further violence, while giving the construct's burgeoning society the best possible chance of survival, was to destroy what remained of the Guardian civilization.
Frameshift drive charging.
By this time, the constructs had been given complete control of the Guardians' munitions and automated war machines. Their attack, when it came, was swift and merciless. The strikes were executed
4, 3, 2, 1.
with a precision that only a machine race could accomplish. The Guardians were utterly destroyed. The Guardians. Physiology. Guardians were a bipedal race, and the typical Guardian was taller and more slender than the average human. They had small, round eyes, a vestigial nose, and 4 digits on each hand. Their vision was superior to that of humans. Corporations. Introduction. The grandest society of merchants in the universe. Self-applied description of the East India Company, 1600 to 1708. During the centuries in which humanity was confined to a single planet, corporations were naturally limited in size and influence, like fish in a bowl. With access to a finite quantity of natural resources and a relatively small arena in which to compete, corporations could not achieve their full theoretical potential. But with the advent of interstellar travel, the fishbowl became an ocean. Corporations could access and exploit entire planets for their mineral resources, and an expanding population, eagerly colonizing system after system, meant a growing customer base. To the governments of the time, the potential for corporate growth was both thrilling and terrifying. Commercial prosperity meant increased tax revenue and higher employment figures, but also raised the worrying prospect of security fleets that could rival the official militaries. It seemed inevitable that the largest corporations would, in time, become the equivalent of nation-states in their own right. With the old restrictions gone, there was simply nothing to stop them. Today, this vision has been partly fulfilled, with several corporations owning entire systems. For many corporate employees, the age-old distinction between a home and a workplace has vanished. Workers on corporate-owned ships, refineries, and outposts can expect to spend their entire lives in the embracement of the company. Despite their immense wealth and power, the corporations have thus far been content to operate within and remain subject to the jurisdictions of the Alliance, Empire, and Federation, rather than mount a serious challenge to any of them. Commentators point to 2 reasons for this. Firstly, corporations thrive by excelling in their chosen fields, and assuming the onerous responsibilities of a government would be a wasteful distraction from the corporate mission. Secondly, given that the corporations already hold much of the real power, especially in the Federation, there is nothing to be gained by abolishing the convenient veneer of the state. Better to operate below the surface, make a show of compliance, and trust in the power of money to smooth the way forward. Corporations. The Achilles Corporation. Optimize, iterate, refine. Achilles is the market leader in computer technology and is particularly noted for developing the reliable, efficient navigation computers used by most starships. The fear of a hyperspace misjump following a computer malfunction, a nightmare scenario that Achilles capitalized on. Corporations. The Achilles Corporation. Optimize, iterate, refine. Achilles is the market leader in computer technology and is particularly noted for developing the reliable, efficient navigation computers
Frameshift drive charging.
used by
Frameshift drive charging.
most starships. The fear of a hyperspace misjump following a computer malfunction, a nightmare scenario that Achilles capitalized on in its advertising, helped to cultivate strong brand loyalty.
4, 3, 2, 1.
In the company's early days. Achilles is also a pioneer in the field of robotics, meaning it has long been hampered by the interstellar ban on the development of self-aware artificial intelligence.
Warning. Temperature critical.
In the late 3200s, rumors surfaced that the corporation was attempting to circumvent these restrictions by placing organically grown brains in robotic bodies. No evidence of any such activity has come to light, and Achilles board members have not deigned to dignify the rumors with a response. There has also been speculation that the company's leaders are extensively cybernetically enhanced, given their history of uncompromising takeovers and corporate machinations. Even their open business operations are characterized by ruthless efficiency, while their private dealings are rumored to involve everything from the blackmail of rival executives to assassination. Achilles' official line is that these rumors are sheer fantasy and a predictable, envious response to success. Nonetheless, the rumors persist, and Achilles' reputation is now so daunting that smaller corporations will roll over at the first sign of a takeover bid, rather than attempt to negotiate for better terms. Nobody wants to become the subject of a career-ending rumor. Corporations. Kane Massey. Because an honest day's work never goes out of fashion. Kane Massey stands as an example of the power of rebranding. During the fiercely competitive era that followed the first migration from Earth, the company's original incarnation, Howlett, Kane and Calvert, rapidly established itself as a profitable mining concern. Through a combination of nepotism and bribery, HC&C secured a federal guarantee of mining rights across several systems, with the caveat that failure to exploit the resources within a set time frame would result in forfeiture. In order to set up their mining operations as quickly as possible, HC&C cut corners on safety, skimped on equipment quality, and made exorbitant promises to potential employees, promises that were later defaulted on. Workplace accidents, which were frequent, were hushed up. By the time these problems came to light, HC&C was a household name, and the fallout was severe. Token attempts at recompense were made, but the company's public image was badly tarnished. A merger with struggling but respected logistics firm Massey Haulage gave HC&C an opportunity to reinvent itself as the local mining company. The rebranded corporation, Kane Massey, presented itself as a salt-of-the-earth, blue-collar operation, whose hard-working employees were treated with dignity. In an uncertain universe, so the advertisements ran, Kane Massey would always be there for you. The campaign was a huge success. Today, Kane Massey is now widely perceived as an old-fashioned company that both understands and sticks up for the working man and woman. But despite this wholesome image, and although safety standards have improved, the company is as acquisitive and concerned with expansion as ever. Corporations. Core dynamics. Unmatched interstellar supremacy. Core Dynamics is a giant conglomerate, best known as one of the galaxy's premier manufacturers of weapon and surveillance systems and starships, with a particular focus on combat vessels. Its product line ranges from the diminutive Eagle to the gargantuan Farragut-class battlecruiser, and also includes the most popular skimmer in the galaxy, the S-4 Sentry. The company is known for its occasional discount events, offering reduced-cost ships either in celebration of a new design or as incentives for participation in a community endeavor. Core Dynamics has a long-standing supply agreement with the Federation and is responsible for the Federal Assault Ship, Corvette, Dropship, and Gunship. As part of this relationship, the company benefits from privileged access to federal black box data reserves, which it uses in its research and development branch. In the ongoing quest for more robust and effective ship designs, there is no substitute for data gleaned from genuine combat encounters. Corporations. Falcon de Lacy. Bridging the stars for half a millennium. Vulcan Manspace, originally a small military supply company, experienced an overnight reversal of fortune when it released the Viper fighter, which proved popular with governments and private citizens alike. Indeed, demand was so high that Falcon Manspace had to farm out Viper production to other companies under license. With wealth came innovation and a range of new designs. Like the Viper, these new ships were named after dangerous snakes. The Cobra marked the company's entry into the trader market, while the lightweight, versatile Sidewinder was designed principally as a reconnaissance craft. As the company's wealth grew, it began to absorb many of the companies to which it had previously granted manufacturing contracts. In almost all cases, the target company's close working relationship with Falcon Manspace made such acquisitions frictionless and mutually beneficial. In 2982, the corporation merged with one of the largest such manufacturers, de Lacy Shipworks, becoming Falcon de Lacy. The company pioneered the now standard modular system of ship design that allows pilots to swap out components with ease. Significantly, the company made the schematics for the modular system freely available to its manufacturing rivals, broadening the choice of compatible modules available to pilots, and thus making the Falcon de Lacy marks more popular. Without this philosophy of component compatibility, spacecraft maintenance might have become a nightmarish scenario in which being unable to get the proper parts could leave a broken-down ship stranded in dry dock for weeks, or worse, subject to botched repair attempts. Today, Falcon de Lacy stands out as one of the most enduring, widespread, and consistently admired corporations in colonized space. Public regard for the company is so high that the Alliance, Empire, and Federation have all made attempts to secure exclusivity to Falcon de Lacy starships. Thus far, their efforts have been unsuccessful. Corporations. Gutermeyer. Effortless elegance. Ship manufacturer Gutermeyer enjoys a supply agreement with the Empire, similar to that between Core Dynamics and the Federation. Gutermeyer is a far younger company, however, and was in fact created by the Empire. The company's ships are considered to embody imperial opulence and are instantly recognizable for their sleek contours and distinctive silhouettes. Imperial Gutermeyer was chartered by Emperor Galen Trascan de Val in 3000 as part of a formal celebration of the millennium, in line with the Emperor's vision of an imperial renaissance in art, design, and architecture. The company's remit, overseen by shipwrights Jordan Blakestow and sculptor Amita Gutermeyer, was to produce a line of ships that will combine functional excellence with a distinct visual style. These would be offered for a limited period to select members of imperial noble houses as a mark of the Emperor's favor. Amita Gutermeyer's involvement was immediately apparent, a reputation having been established through well-regarded public artworks incorporating graceful, contoured forms. This helped to drive public demand for the ships, which became sought-after status symbols. Demand was so high that owners were forced to hire squadrons of mercenary escorts to prevent hijack. The Emperor promptly ordered Imperial Gutermeyer to go into full-time production and to make part of its range available for general purchase. From its inception, Gutermeyer has employed a coterie of accomplished imperial artisans to ensure that their ships continue to reflect Amita Gutermeyer's aesthetic principles. When, in 3006, Amita Guttermeyer died in unexplained circumstances, she was interned in the Guttermeyer family crypt on Achenar 6B. Corporations. Lakon Spaceways. Hard-working ships for hard-working people. Lakon Spaceways is a starship manufacturer specializing in sturdy vessels for cargo haulage and deep space exploration. They have a longer pedigree than most other ship manufacturers, their first dedicated transport vessel having been built on Earth in the 26th century. The company's early models were characterized by the fact that they could be easily repaired away from port, a quality that has been retained to this day, despite the prevalence of affordable repair services. In 3303, Lakon entered into partnership with the Alliance to produce a range of military ships in response to the emerging Thargoid threat. As of 10 Defender, the Alliance Chieftain, the Alliance Crusader, and the Alliance Challenger. Lakon vessels tend to garner both praise and derision for their unpretentious, functional design, which is informed more by practical concerns than aesthetic considerations. Those who champion the chunky look of Lakon craft typically say that they prefer their ships to look like ships, not abstract sculptures. Corporations. Mistopolos Mining. 300 years of reliability. In 2951, an imperial senator named Gia Mistopoulos helped an imperial group wrest control of a key set of mining rights from a federally backed partnership. Mistopoulos later took direct control of the mining operations, and under his and his daughter Nia's guidance, the company rapidly expanded. The Mistopoulos family was already held in great esteem for its patronage of the arts and loyalty to the Empire, and many Imperials were more than happy to do business with them. Accordingly, it was within the Empire that Mistopoulos gained the most ground, though the company also established operations in several independent systems. Much like the Empire itself, Mistopoulos has been under the control of a single dynasty for centuries. Rather than adopt conventional marketing strategy, it has opted to focus its corporate spotlight on the individuals in charge, thus capitalizing on the imperial cultural regard for people of taste and status. The Mistopoulos family are trained from birth to play the part of charismatic aristocrats to the full, acting as ambassadors not only for the company, but for the Empire. In particular, they seek to demonstrate the viability and humanity of the imperial way of life as a direct ideological challenge to the Federation. The company's current head, Gabriela Mistopoulos, has gone out of her way to ensure that any slaves working for the company are exceptionally well treated. She also earned plaudits for a prisoner reform program that offered imperial prisoners at Jennings Hollow the chance to become corporate slaves, and to earn a generous performance-related bonus. But despite the popularity of this gambit, Federal and Alliance citizens were quick to point out that a slave is still a slave, regardless of the generosity of the owner. Corporations. Saud Kruger. The finest for the best. To independent pilots, Saud Kruger is best known for luxurious passenger liners, such as the Beluga, Dolphin, and Orca, although the company also runs a tourism branch under the Astrogator brand. Saud Kruger started life as a yacht manufacturer in Bedaho, although the narrowness of the market curtailed the company's growth. When company director Stanislav Kruger purchased the struggling Astrogator touring company in 3270, he gave Saud Kruger a foothold in multiple star systems. Kruger then refurbished the Astrogator fleet and revamped the somewhat stale tour itinerary to give it a more adventurous, thrill-seeking flavor, which proved highly successful. Goldskin leather, sourced exclusively from the planet home in the Bedaho system, has been used in the interiors of Saud Kruger ships for years and is part of the company's distinctive aesthetic. Saud Kruger has the exclusive right to produce real goldskin, which comes embedded with coded nanoparticles that act as guarantors of authenticity. Saud-Kruger also competes in the field of interstellar mapping and deep space exploration, and likes to emphasize the danger and glamour of exploring. The company's critics claim this approach risks transforming the vitally important field of space exploration into a pastime for the idle rich, thus alienating the many freelancers on whose hard work the discipline depends. Corporations. The Sirius Corporation. Powering the galaxy. Of all the mega corporations to dominate civilized space, none compare to the wealth and influence of the Sirius Corporation. The rise of the Sirius Corporation began in 2339, when the organization launched a corporate colonization mission, the first of its kind, to the Sirius system. From there, the corporation went on to become the lead supplier of fuel and technologies to both the Empire and the Federation, catapulting it to powerhouse status. The corporation's promise not to favor either side in the event of conflict helped to cement its position. As the corporation grew, fuel supply and drive manufacture remained its core business, although judicious expansion into other markets supported its expansion. But the corporation's ascendance has not been without complication. In 3251, it introduced a technologically revolutionary passenger liner called the Antares, which it hoped would usher in a new age in interplanetary travel. Unfortunately, however, the ship disappeared during its maiden voyage. It was speculated that a failure in the ship's internal containment systems had destroyed the vessel, but it was not until 3302 that wreckage from the ship was recovered, and this hypothesis proved correct. The Antares incident cast a long shadow, stalling the Sirius Corporation's plans to develop further superfast liners. But 3278 saw a reversal of fortune with the introduction of a new, faster drive system. The success of this new system more than made up for the losses that followed the Antares incident, propelling the organization to new heights. Today, the corporation has multiple divisions, many of them giant conglomerates themselves. But its primary focus remains the manufacture of fusion reactors, hyperdrives, and hyperdrive fuels. This division still operates under the banner of the Sirius Corporation, although technically it is conducted by Sirius Hyperdrive, with the parent corporation acting as a holding company. The company's mining, industrial, and power divisions are probably its largest. Sirius Mining works closely with Sirius Industrial to produce specialist equipment
Docking request granted.
for both planetary and asteroid mining. In addition to industrial smelters and refineries, atmospheric processing units, and waste processing reactors. Sirius Power produces generators ranging from 10 kilowatt devices to 100 gigawatt plants for industrial facilities and atmospheric processors. The Sirius Corporation maintains a large private fleet with which to defend its interests. The majority of its ships are supplied by Guttamaia, although a proportion are manufactured under license in Sirius's own shipyards. The corporation controls dozens of star systems and has even created a governmental subdivision, Sirius Gov, dedicated to managing these systems. Indeed, it has been observed that the people of these systems enjoy better quality of life and greater personal security, courtesy of Sirius's private fleet than many independent systems. The Federation. Military. The Federal Navy. The Federation has maintained a battle fleet since the days of the first federal colony.
Warning. Landing gear not deployed.
Which was established in the Tau Ceti system. Its official mandate is to protect shipping and
Landing gear deployed.
defend the borders of federal space. But it has also frequently been deployed against the Federation's own rebellious citizens. At first, the Federation's member systems were required to contribute the required ships, making the mustering process a cumbersome one. But following the Birthright Wars, corporations were chartered to produce centralized
Docking successful. Engines disengaged.
which made for a far more efficient system. The naval shipyards and training academy were originally based in the Anlave system, but the academy has since been moved to the custom world of Navy Central in Eta Cassiopeia. The Navy benefited from massive investment following the forced sell-off of colonial land in the Birthright Wars, during which it was wielded against the colonists in a bitterly resented move. When the
incoming message
Thargoids were first encountered in 2849, the Navy was boosted once again in fear of the alien threat, and a further bolstering followed in 2867, in the aftermath of what were believed to be Thargoid attacks. Governor Raul Santorini championed heavy cuts to the Navy budget in 3022, which were not reversed until President Varian Scott came to power in 3144. Scott talked up the Thargoid threat, again increasing funding to the Navy and removing the requirement for military actions to be approved by congressional vote. Land forces. In addition to the rank and file, the Federation still enjoys the loyal service of special military divisions, such as the Gurkha Regiment, who have served since the days of Earth. Keeping up long-standing traditions such as this is an important link to the past for Federal citizens. The Federation. Culture and values. If you want to eat, you have to work. The Federation has no room for freeloaders. It has nurtured the core frontier values of self-reliance and entrepreneurship since its inception, and respects the self-made citizen. This insistence upon paying your way and pulling your weight also applied, notoriously, to the process whereby new colonies were established. Until a given colony was able to fulfill the development goals set down for it by the Federation, it could only ever be a dependency with no voice of its own. Given that the Federation's assigned goals could vary wildly from one colony to the next, this requirement frequently chafed with the colonists. While the Federation maintained that it was simply exercising flexibility, since no two worlds were the same, some colonies were tempted away to the Empire by the promise of being recognized as sovereign without having to jump through arbitrary hoops. Corporations took humanity into space. The Federation has never forgotten the role played by private enterprise in the initial migration from Earth. Corporations enjoy substantial freedom and influence under the Federation, so much so that it often seems they are the powers truly running the show.
ship released. Engines engaged.
Citizens can be as passionately loyal to their corporations as they would be to a family or clan group. And it is common for successive generations of a given family to serve the same corporation. Harvest the limitless riches of space,
Landing gear retracted.
but respect non-human life. The Federation and the Empire have hugely differing views on the primacy of humanity in the cosmos. While the Federation insists that its colonies treat indigenous non-human life with care, the Empire
Frameshift drive charging.
typically takes a more human-centric approach. This attitude has allowed the Empire to poach several developing Federation colonies who felt themselves hamstrung by ecological regulation.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Wealth is freedom. Federal citizens actively embrace corporate culture, expressing their identity through brand choices and media consumption. The Federation. Diplomatic relations. The Empire. In 2292, a group of colonists established a settlement on Akanar 6D, chosen for its remoteness. The original intent was merely to live free from interference, but autocrat Henson Duval rapidly took control of the colony and had himself proclaimed emperor. The Federation attempted military reprisals, partly due to the nascent empire's insistence on independence, but faced a harder fight than they
Frameshift drive charging.
expected and were held at bay. Over the next 50 years, the Empire expanded to many other worlds. The Federation's relationship with the Empire is one of entrenched mistrust.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Stemming from irreconcilable ideological differences. mollified somewhat by the corporations, which have a presence in both territories, and thus act as a stabilizing influence.
Taking heat damage.
Hostilities between the powers, when they occur at all, are usually conducted through proxy forces. The Alliance. In 3228, the federally aligned corporations supplying the Alioth system attempted to raise their prices, leading to a citizen rebellion. Several independent systems assisted the rebels. Neither galactic superpower was able to suppress the revolt. The Empire was too far away to intervene effectively, whereas the Federation was
Frameshift drive charging.
hampered by unexpected public sympathy for the rebels. The Alliance of Independent Systems, founded on Alioth in 3230, drew in new members over the next 20 years.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Some were already independent, while others defected from the Federation or Empire. In order to keep more worlds from defecting, the Federation was forced to reform the process, whereby colonies could achieve full federal membership. So far, it has only managed to slow the loss of worlds to the Alliance, and has yet to tempt any back. The Thargoids. Human Thargoid contact. The Thargoids are a non-human race with a history of hostility towards humanity. The first recorded encounter with a Thargoid ship took place in 2849, although earlier undocumented encounters are believed to have taken place. In the years that followed, contact with lone Thargoid vessels was intermittently reported. Humanity clashed with the Thargoids in the 32nd century, but details of the conflict remained scarce for many years, and it proved difficult to differentiate authentic accounts of Thargoid encounters from the sensationalist media stories of the time. The discovery of abandoned intergalactic Naval Reserve arm bases in 3303 did much to dispel the fog, however. The INRA, a joint federal imperial initiative established in 3193, was responsible for researching the Thargoids and developing technologies to counter their aggression. But the organization's lack of accountability meant that the details of its research did not come to light until years after its dissolution. Almost all of the reliable data concerning the Thargoids has been sourced from INRA facilities. This data, originally deemed highly confidential, was declassified in 3304, following a resolution from the federal government and an imperial decree. Some controversy over the backing and funding of the INRA remains, however. The Thargoids. Physiology. Human understanding of Thargoid physiology is far from complete, but recovered INRA data has offered some insights into their nature. INRA records describe the average Thargoid as physically larger than a human being, and generally insectoid in appearance. Thargoid biology is carbon-based, using an RNA-like encoding for biological information, but Thargoid chemistry is based on ammonia rather than water. Consequently, while Thargoids can comfortably tolerate environments as cold as -80 degrees Celsius, they cannot withstand environments warmer than 45 degrees Celsius for long. According to notes compiled by Dr. Peregrine Hennig, an INRA researcher, Thargoids can survive for a significant time in the vacuum of space without apparent discomfort, and can tolerate radiation and extreme cold for far longer than a human. The Thargoids. Vulnerabilities. In 3250, the INRA developed a biological weapon known as the mycoid virus for use against the Thargoids. The virus was the result of an accidental discovery made by an INRA researcher, who noted that a particular strain of fungus was found to thrive on the hulls of Thargoid vessels, and appeared to be digesting the material of which the ship was made. The INRA refined the fungal strain and began experimenting on living Thargoids in their spacecraft. The mycoid proved to have deleterious effects on both. Leading to the swift elimination of the Thargoids active in human-occupied space at the time. It is widely assumed...
Zorgan Peterson, Foxtrot Alpha Romeo. This is the Flight Operations Department. Please comply with established docking procedures, Commander.
that since the last human-Thargoid conflict, The Thargoids have developed an immunity to the mycoid virus.
Request approved. Cleared for landing on docking bay 3-6.
Individuals: Aidan Tanner.
Our species has been banding together to fight the outsider since we lived in caves. We stand against the lawless, the invaders, and the monsters. And we're proud to do it. But you have to remember one thing. Nobody in the history of conflict ever saw himself as a monster. Everyone believes they're the hero of their own story. If you can't understand that, if you can't stand in the enemy's shoes, even for a second, and ask yourself why he thinks he needs to kill you, then you don't know what it means
Landing gear deployed.
to be a soldier.
Aidan Tanner, addressed to Federal Cadets, 3298. Admiral Aidan Tanner is a senior officer in the Federal Navy. He has served for more than 4 decades, and in 3303 was given significant responsibility in the struggle against the Thargoids, first being appointed to Chief of Federal Security and
Touchdown confirmed. Commence system shutdown.
later to Chief Military Liaison for the Cross Superpower Initiative, Aegis. He is widely respected, even outside of federal space, for his conscientious and level-headed approach to conflict. Born in 3254, Tanner was expected to follow in the footsteps of his authoritarian father by becoming a doctor, but instead enlisted in the Federal Navy, along with a group of friends, in what he would later describe as a rash act of adolescent rebellion that I have not once regretted. Tanner's father died in 3277. The two never resolved their estrangement. Tanner's early naval career was anything but distinguished. Known to his comrades in arms as Spoonie for his habit of eating directly from food packets instead of using plates, he was distinguished more by his irreverent sense of humor than his competence. 6 months in, Tanner was found to be responsible for a scurrilous newsletter that satirized several senior officers, including Sergeant Burke Hazel, who was offended and deeply hurt. Hazel had taken a personal interest in Tanner and had encouraged him to persist when the cadet had struggled with basic training. Tanner's defense that he had been trying to improve morale was rejected, and although he was allowed to continue his service, he was marked as a potential insubordinate, a label that would later return to haunt him. Tanner's chief instructional officer, Commander Myra Dunstock, warned him to take military life more seriously. She took Tanner to a refugee facility, an experience he would later characterize as showing him what the military is there to prevent. Tanner recognized a last chance when he saw it, discarded his role as camp comedian, and threw himself into his training with unprecedented energy. The decisive incident in Tanner's career was the Autolycus Mutiny of 3271. At the time, Tanner was serving as Chief Gunnery Officer on board the FDN Autolycus, a Farragut-class battlecruiser, under the command of Captain Jaden Horn. The ship was dispatched to restore order at Cold Harbor Station, which had been occupied by rebels following a descent into civil disorder. Captain Horn's orders were to monitor the station and await reinforcements, but when contact with the station was abruptly lost, he became convinced an attack was imminent. Surveillance footage later showed Horn acting in an increasingly erratic fashion. He screamed orders, slurred his words, and struck an ensign for making a minor mistake. Seeing a group of civilian ships preparing to leave the station, Horn ordered Tanner to open fire, convinced they were about to ram the Autolycus. Tanner refused to obey the order, claiming it was unlawful and that Horn was unfit to command. In the time it took for a furious Horn to have Tanner thrown in the brig, the escaping ships had jumped out of the system. At Tanner's court-martial, Horn tried to use his history of rebelliousness against him, but an explosive series of revelations followed. The escaping ships had been carrying evacuees, and the station's apparent silence was in fact due to Hall himself, who had disabled shipborne communications without telling his crew. Hall, who it would later emerge had been suffering from hexalamine-induced psychosis, committed suicide mid-trial by hijacking a fighter and detonating a grenade inside the cockpit. Tanner was exonerated, receiving a commendation from President Antonia Madison for his actions. Individuals. Aisling Duval.
My grandfather had an heirloom he used to keep in our winter palace. It was a priceless marble statuette of one of our ancestors standing with his foot on a woman's neck, while she looks up at him in fear or adoration, probably both. I loathed it. It was commissioned to commemorate some victory or other, but that wasn't the point of the thing. The message was clear, and it's the same one I've heard all my life. Deep down, the people we dominate are happy to be dominated. When I was 6 years old, I smashed it. Down the stairs in his gown. He asked if it was an accident. There was such a strange look in his eyes. I knew that if I said yes, nobody would argue. Nothing more would be said. But I didn't. I stamped my foot and said, "No, Daddy. I did it on purpose." It's the same with tradition. The people who pass it on think it's precious. They expect you to cherish it and pass it on in turn. But what they think doesn't matter, because the responsibility rests with you. If you know it's wrong, then you have to smash it. On purpose.
Aisling Duval. A fireside chat with Serena. 3301. Princess Aisling Duval, born in 3276, is a prominent member of the Imperial Royal family.
Landing gear
Shift
retracted.
detach complete. You are clear to leave.
The eldest child of the infamous Prince Harold, she had a troubled upbringing. Her father was notorious for his hedonistic lifestyle, while her mother, entertainer Imogen Eccentrica Gabriellini, died from an aneurysm shortly after Aisling's birth. The autopsy identified the cause of death as an overdose of purple sunflower, an obscure and expensive narcotic, but conspiracy theorists insisted that she was murdered to remove an embarrassment to the royal family. Aisling has indicated that she is aware of these rumors, but has never commented on them. Despite living a life of great privilege, Aisling has publicly embraced the cause of the less fortunate and become an outspoken opponent of slavery, something that has made her the target of fierce criticism
Frameshift drive charging.
from more traditionalist Imperials. But despite this criticism, Aisling is a popular figure with a widespread media presence. Her campaigning has brought definite benefits to many of the poorest in Imperial
4, 3, 2,
society, and gone some way towards easing tensions between the Empire and the Federation. Her critics, however, dismiss her as a puppet, doing the bidding of a shadowy circle of advisors. They claim there's no underlying coherence to Aisling's policies. To them, she is a naive and sentimental child, without the necessary experience for politics, backing one populist cause after another, always conscious of how her activism is affecting her brand. Significantly, the most savage of Aisling's critics and the staunchest of her defenders agree on a counterpoint to this, that her apparent vacuity is nothing but a front, carefully created in collusion with the very advisors whom others believe are exploiting her. The People's Princess, they argue, is exceptionally good at being underestimated. Following the death of Hengist Duval in 3301, Aisling was considered by many to be a viable contender for the Imperial throne. As Aisling was born out of wedlock, however, and her father was removed from the line of succession on the grounds of mental incapacity, Orissa Lavinie Duval was deemed to have the stronger claim. Individuals. Hengist Duval. Hengist Duval, 3163 to 3301, was the 15th ruler of the Empire. He was assassinated on the day of his wedding to Florence Lavinie. Hengist reigned during a time of significant change. The Imperial Senate had begun to grow in power, a process that had begun during the long sickness of Hengist's father, Hesketh. The development of the frameshift drive had radically altered life in human-occupied space, facilitating easy access to goods and interstellar travel, and opening formerly isolated cultures to outside influence. Old animosities between the Empire and the Federation finally began to fade. Hengist appeared to neither resist nor oppose these many changes, instead opting to keep the Empire as stable as he could on a day-to-day basis. This middle ground approach was deeply unpopular with the Empire's hardcore traditionalist elements, who saw Hengist as short-sighted, detached, and complacent. In 3238, Hengist wed Anthea Viola Lampeter in an arranged marriage, planned since his childhood by his late father. Despite a storm of publicity and celebrations across Imperial space that verged on the hysterical, there was clearly little genuine affection between the couple. It was an open secret that the match had been made solely because of optimal genetic compatibility, and that Hengist could not refuse without dishonoring his father's memory. As the marriage crumbled, Hengist spent much of his time with his boyhood friend, Aristide de Lavigne, and his wife, Florence, at their estate on Achenar. Inflammatory tracts from this period portray the imperial dynasty and its noble cohorts as little more than libertines, indulging in lascivious affairs and lengthy holidays, while the Senate did the real work of government. The most scurrilous rumor was that the Duval genetic code had been corrupted by centuries of interference, prompting speculation that a successor of true blood would have to be found. The birth of Hengist's heir, Prince Harold, temporarily...
Zorgon Peterson, Foxtrot Alpha Romeo, observe docking reservation protocols. Submit a request before landing.
...to the skeptics. A carefully orchestrated father-son photo shoot, when Harold was 9, showed the pair riding horses on Achenar, throwing javelins, watching a senatorial debate, and preparing for a seasonal feast. The photo shoot was clearly designed to appeal to traditional imperial values, and is
Permission authorized. Proceed to landing pad 06.
needed. For several years after, Prince Harold was the darling of the Empire, a symbol of promise and hope. The intense media focus on the prince's life is now believed to be partly responsible for his fall from grace, which saw him become a notorious playboy and philanderer, and which eventually...
Maintain approach. Prep for landing.
...resulted in his exclusion from the succession on the grounds of mental incapacity. Towards the end of Hengist's life, it emerged that Orissa Lavigne, the daughter of Florence Lavigne, was in fact his daughter. Hengist intended to strengthen her claim to the throne by marrying Florence, thus legitimizing Orissa, but he was assassinated before this could take place. The most enduring criticism of Emperor Hengist is that he failed to plan adequately for the future. Certainly, the matter of the succession created tensions that endure to this day. Colonia.
Landing gear deployed.
We're in a tight spot, and people came through for us without even being asked. That's what people do. Didn't heard that the whole idea was rather crazy, of course. That just made them more determined.
Jacques, owner of...
Landing complete. Ship secured.
Jacques Station. Colonia lies some 22,000 light-years from the core systems, and was the first system in the Colonia Nebula to be settled by humanity. The circumstances of Colonia's founding are highly unusual. The system was colonized as a result of the spontaneous actions of independent pilots, rather than through a formal expansion program. The colonization of Colonia began with an accident involving Jacques Station, a jump-capable Orbis starport. In May 3302, the station executed a long-distance jump to Beagle Point, but when it failed to reach its destination, it was feared lost. In June 3302, an independent pilot discovered Jacques Station in the EL Pru RST D394 system. suffering from technical issues and effectively stranded. The galactic community reacted swiftly, launching an independent supply drive to restore the starport to functionality. The relief effort soon exceeded its original objective, and many of those involved began to see the distant system as a chance to establish a new community, far from the wearisome conflicts and entrenched viewpoints of the core systems. Talk of a permanent colony went from light-hearted speculation to serious planning. In September 3302, D394 was formally renamed Colonia, and the first
Ship restraints retracted. Access corridor is clear.
permanent settlement was constructed on the surface of Colonia 2A. An influx of migrants boosted the system's population, aided financially by the Colonia Council, the region's new governing body, and materially by independent pilots. Colonia is widely viewed as a monument to community spirit.
Moderate traffic in this sector. Make way for larger vessels.
And human ingenuity, as well as being the first step into a previously uninhabited region of space. Colonia's population is still small, but the region is undergoing continuous expansion and attracting attention from both enterprising corporations and optimistic
You are clear of the station. Safe travels, Commander.
migrants.
Frameshift drive charging.
To date, Colonia has remained untroubled by the strife that often plagues the core systems,
Frameshift drive charging.
earning it a reputation as a sanctuary.
4, 3, 2, 1. Engage.
But it remains to be seen if this nascent community will thrive in isolation or be engulfed by political and corporate forces. Raxxla. To the jewel that burns on the brow of the Mother of Galaxies, to the whisperer in witch space, the siren of the deepest void, the parent's grief, the lover's woe, and the yearning of our vagabond hearts. To Raxxla, alleged toast of the Dark Wheel. The legend of Raxxla has been circulating, in whispers, for centuries. The quest for this mysterious place, the location of which is a deadly secret, was said to be the principal aim of the Dark Wheel, a putative fraternity of legend chasers from the early days of interstellar travel. The earliest recorded mention of Raxxla dates from 2296, from the Journal of Art Tornqvist, a shipboard mechanic based in the Tau Ceti system. He writes, Cora comes home, soused and raving with wild stories, a new one every night. She claims she's found a map to some pirate stash, and all I have to do is loan her my ship so we can go dig it up. Maybe we should go find Raxxla while we're at it. Although Tornqvist's account is the first known attestation of Raxxla, it is clear from context that the myth was already in circulation. It is extremely difficult to find consistency among the various fragmentary rumors of Raxxla. Much like the ancient myths of Atlantis, El Dorado, and the Kingdom of Prester John, interpretations of the story range from the skeptical to the outlandish. Raxxla has been suggested to be anything from an unremarkable moon to a state of cosmic enlightenment. The earliest documented stories tend to agree on several points, however. That Raxxla is a definite place, and that it holds a mystical secret. Several versions of the Raxxla story mention an alien artifact, the Omphilus Rift, described as a gateway or tunnel through which parallel universes can be accessed. These details, however, were later shown to bear a striking resemblance to the children's story, Princess Astrophel and the Spiraling Stars, and soon lost credibility. Undaunted, some Raxxla seekers insisted that the story's author had cunningly concealed facts about the mysterious locale in his book, as hints for those with eyes to see. Students of Raxxla lore have noted that the legend exerts a strangely potent fascination on the minds of seekers. Commentators have compared this sensation to Fernway, the uncountable longing for a place one has never seen. More than one interstellar treasure seeker has become obsessed with Raxxla to the exclusion of all other dreams, and spent his or her entire life in a futile search for it. Raxxla also plays a role in several conspiracy theories, most of which attest that it has already been discovered by some kind of sinister cabal or sole tyrant, which has leveraged its power to establish covert dominance over humanity. Whatever the truth of the matter, one thing remains irrefutable. The legend of Raxxla continues.
Zorgon, Foxtrot, Alpha, Romeo, you are now in Federation space. Be advised, docking access to this station is by permission only.
Is to inspire explorers and conspiracy theorists to this day. Raxxla, to the jewel that burns on the brow of the Mother of Galaxies, to the Whisperer in...
Maintain current heading until further instruction. Landing authorized. Assigned to landing pad 1-4. Decrease speed to 100.
Scan detected. Landing gear deployed.
Do you have authorization to be inside the docking bay? Remember, loitering is a violation.
Landing successful. Ship is locked down.
Check again. Unauthorized loitering. May trigger. Response.
Landing gear retracted. Frameshift drive charging.
Foxtrot Alpha Romeo. This is an independent star system, Commander. Request docking permission prior to touching down. Request approved. Set down on landing pad 01. Meters from touchdown.
is Independent Farsoth. We urge all visitors to utilize our full range of services, and we hope you have a productive stay at our facility.
We would like to welcome all pilots to this starport. Be sure to check station services for any updates. To extend a warm welcome to all visitors. Please ensure Departure authorized. Visitors to utilize our full range of services, and we hope you have a productive stay.
Frameshift drive charging. Frameshift drive charging.
Foxtrot Alpha Romeo, please request permission from Starcon before attempting to dock at this station. Landing authorized. Proceed to landing pad 1-4. Prepare for oncoming traffic, Commander. Watch your blind spots.
Landing gear deployed.
Meters from touchdown.
Please show consideration for fellow visitors. Slow down and give other vessels maneuvering space inside the dock.
Landing confirmed. Pad restraints engaged.
This facility operates under regulations forbidding the use of aggression in or around the starship. Starcon thanks pilots for their cooperation. In the interest of smooth traffic flow within the docking bay, Starcon requests that pilots avoid blocking access to docking pads. Pilots, please show consideration for fellow visitors. Slow down and give other vessels maneuvering space inside the dock. would like to remind all pilots to avoid blocking access to docking pads during arrival and departure.